it's Rebecca Page and I wanted to give you a sneak peek of one of our family Christmas traditions. It is matching PJs, and this year I've done them from the Family PJ pattern, and I've even done a little mini sew along so you can see how to make the bottoms. This is the adorable little pajama top that comes with the pattern. It's got buttons down the front, optional piping around the collar, and optional piping down the front. There is also an optional little front pocket. Other than that, it's long sleeved, it's woven, it's loose fitting. I wouldn't call it baggy, but it's definitely very loose fitting, so it's really comfortable to get cozy in Christmas with. In the pattern, you will notice that all of the seams are done using French seams. So these are my absolute favorite. Some people love them, some people hate them. I love them. And this is where all of the raw edges are enclosed in the seam, and then on the outside you can't see it either. What I'm going to do for the pajama bottoms is show you using an overlocker or serger method. You can also use a regular stitch on your sewing machine and just zigzag the raw edges to stop them fraying. It's much quicker than making it using French seams, so let's get started. The first pattern piece you're going to need is the one of the legs. I'm going to start with the back leg and also the pockets. I am making the size 5 to 6 years for my youngest child, but you can do this, it's the same with any of the adult men, women or children sizes. It's exactly the same, and I'm going to be putting pockets. You can skip the pockets if you want to for a faster sew, and the first thing you need to do is make a mark where this little notch is here. So there's a little line on the side seam, and you can see I have placed a pin on the side seam. The next thing to note is I've placed another pin up the top. This does not mean anything to me except that it's the back. The back and the front can sometimes look the same, especially when you're making 5 different pairs of pajamas for all the children and the mum and dad. So I put a little pin in to show me that that is the back piece so that I know that these are my backs. I've also got my pocket pieces here. Something else to note is that I have cut my pockets slightly bigger than the pattern piece. It's not in the pattern. This is just a little hack I do because this particular child, I know, loves to stuff her pockets with loads and loads of things, and the bigger the pocket, the happier the child. So I've got my 2 back pieces here, and I've laid them so that they are both right side up for this fast serging method, and I've got one of my pocket pieces, and I'm going to place the pocket piece right side down. So now this is right sides together, and I'm going to pin or clip it at just underneath that mark there that we put on the side seam. Can remove that pin now because the pocket's being held in place, and then I'm going to take another pocket and do exactly the same to the other back piece. So the pockets are right sides together, and then I'm going to stitch or serge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance down the side here. Once you've stitched it on, press the pocket so that it is laying outwards away from the garment on both of the back pieces, and then we're going to repeat to stitch the pocket onto both of the front pieces. So it's going to look identical, other than this is the front versus the back, and going to measure down the same amount so that the pocket sits flat on there. A good way to check that you've measured to put the pockets at the same place is once you have pinned it, to get your back piece that you have already stitched the pocket onto and lay it on top, and make sure that the pocket is in exactly the same place, and that way you know they're going to line up when we stitch the front and back together. So for now, take your 2 front pieces with your pockets right sides together and stitch them using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Next, we're going to take 1 front piece and 1 back piece and lay them right sides together. You'll need to make sure you've got matching front and backs so that you've got the crotch curve matching. And if you've placed a marking on your back piece like I have with this pin, make sure that you don't have 2 back pieces, that you've got a back and a front. With that said, once we've got them together, line them up, and the way I like to do this is to take the right angle between the fold of the pocket and the garment and match that up on both sides. So I'm going to be matching here this little angle where the pocket meets the pattern, and align the fold so that the fold is matched up together, and then also the actual join in between the two pieces. And I'm going to start with a clip there, or a pin, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, line up this fold and line up the join between the pocket and the piece. And so that gives us now it being aligned here, and then I can clip or pin from the pocket up to the top and then also around the pocket, and that should have it matching up nicely. As we talked about earlier, you can be using a regular sewing machine and then a zigzag stitch to finish the edges. So I'm going to show you the seam using a regular sewing machine. You can do the whole thing using a regular sewing machine with a zigzag stitch on the outside. But this particular seam, even if you are using a serger, I recommend that you do it on a regular sewing machine first, because it means you're going to be able to get a nice clean edge around this corner here by the pocket. So sew this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're going to repeat on the other front and back piece on the other side of the garment. When you get to this corner, put your needle down, lift your presser foot, turn the garment 90 degrees, and then we're going to keep sewing and repeat the same thing on the other side. When you get around this bottom edge, I recommend you go slowly and turn the garment with both hands as you're going. You can put the presser foot down and do a little pivot at any point if you get too close into the edge of your seam allowance, or if you just keep turning it quite hard, you should be able to get around that edge. And then we're going to curve back up here. I'm keeping my seam allowance pressed out towards the pocket. And if I see it start to ripple, I'm going to put my foot down and just lay that seam allowance flat again. And then come out to what looks like 1/2 inch, put my needle down, put the presser foot up, turn it, and then I'll keep stitching all the way down the side seam. So now we're going to finish this seam allowance. You can either use a zigzag stitch or a serger, it's up to you. It is a little bit tricky as you get around this corner here. We're going to go as close as we can without actually stitching over the main seam. And that's why we do the seam on a regular sewing machine first, is to get a really clean edge there. As I get to here, I'm gonna pull this pocket down a little bit without actually placing any pressure on here, just to stretch this area out. I'm going to do the same thing as I get to this corner. I'm not pulling on the fabric, but I am stretching it out to give this as straight an edge as possible so that the stitches don't fall off the edge of the garment. So if we take a little look at this here, you can see that the serger has come in kind of a curve around here. There is a way where you can do a pivot, but I find the stitches sometimes slip off. If they slip off using this way, you could try the pivot option, which you can, there's lots of YouTube videos on that. Or I find if I just do a little zigzag stitch here with my sewing machine, it holds those stitches on to keep that edge finished. So now we're going to do the other side as well. So this is the front and back now stitched together and with the edges finished down the pocket side. If you're not doing the pocket, you would just stitch straight down there in one line. You can see that the front is narrower than the back, and these crotch lines here do not match up, and neither does the top here. That is correct and accurate. What we're going to do now is we're going to stitch this inner leg seam, and what you're going to need to do is take this front piece and pull it over so that the lines match up here with the back piece. If you have a plaid or a stripe, you're going to find that these lines do not match up quite so neatly. I like to do the top and then the bottom and then in between if you know that you've cut accurately. If you're not sure you've cut accurately, then start at the crotch and pin or clip your way down. And we're going to do this with both of the front and back pieces, and you can stitch and then finish it, or you can serge it. I'm going to go straight for serging on both of them. Right, I've now got two matching trouser legs. These are the backs at the back and this is the front. So I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to turn it right side out. So if I put my arm through and just pull it all the way through, so now the seams are on the inside of this one, but the seams are still on the outside of that one there. I'm going to take the one that is right side out and I'm going to put it inside the other one. So then one trouser leg is inside the other and they are right sides together. And then what I want to do is shove it down far enough inside, and you can come up the leg and give it a little bit of a pull to bring it all the way inside if you like. And I'm going to line it up so that the two inner leg seams are matched up together, and I'm going to clip or pin them together. I like to place it so that one seam allowance is facing in one direction and one in the other. It just reduces bulk a little bit, especially for the little ones my little ones find the seams really irritating. And then you want to match up the rest of these raw edges and clip or pin them together all the way along this crotch seam. You can stitch or serge the seam. Again, it's a half inch seam allowance. I'm going to use a serger, and if you've put pins in your back pieces like I have, just be careful that you don't stitch over them. So here we go, my trousers are right side together and I'm going to stitch down and around the crotch seam. I'm just going to move these pins along that mark the back. In fact, I only need one in here now, not one on each side. I still want to know what's the back so that it's out of the way. We've now stitched the crotch seam. I'm going to take the trouser leg that's inside the other one and I'm just going to pull it out so that it is now looking like a pair of trousers. There we go. So we now have an assembled pair of trousers. Next we need to do the waistband. Now that it's assembled together, I can see I've got my two back pieces and my two front pieces together correctly, and the back is taller, so I don't need this pin in anymore, and I'm going to remove that because I know that that's the back. Now, there are different ways you can finish the waistband. You could do a serging stitch all around the top and then just turn it over once, or you can fold it half an inch and then fold it again another just over 1 inch and stitch around. That's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to fold this over half an inch and then I'm going to fold it again just over 1 inch. The reason it's just over 1 inch is because we're using elastic that then will fit in easily. If you do it exactly on 1 inch, you might find it tricky to get your elastic in. Now, if we have a little look at this before we sew, you can see that I have folded my waistband over half an inch and then just over 1 inch. And what I've done with the pinning is my own little way that I like to do when I'm doing a waistband is we need to leave a gap to feed the elastic through. So I always denote that by a pin vertically, and then I pin the whole rest of the waistband with horizontal pins. Normally I would use a pin that goes 90 degrees to the stitching so that I don't accidentally sew over it. But here I want to remember to leave a gap because I've stitched too many waistbands where I've forgotten to leave a gap and it drives me crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on the machine and start at the first pin at the gap, and then I'm going to finish at the other pin so that it leaves about 1 inch, 1.5 inch big gap to feed my elastic through, and I'm going to back stitch either side. I'm going to stitch quite close to the fold, but not all the way over so that it goes off. Something to make sure when you get to the side seams is that you have put the seam allowance facing forward, that way the hand can go into the pocket easily. is the gap here that we're going to feed our elastic through on the waistband. I've still got the garment wrong sides out to give me easy access to this. I've got my elastic here. I'm going to pin one edge of it to the garment and the other one I'm going to feed into the hole. You can use a safety pin if you like. I'm going to use this little nifty elastic threader, if I can see around the camera, to attach it. It attaches to the elastic, it kind of just snips on, and then I feed this edge through. You've got to put it nice and tight so it doesn't pull off though if you use one of these. Now try and keep your elastic so that it doesn't twist as you thread it through. Keep it nice and flat. The other thing is to make sure before you thread your elastic through that you've measured it on the actual child if possible, or the adult, whoever it is that is going to be wearing it, because two reasons. One is that the elastic measurements in the pattern, while they're a good estimate, they are designed for the largest size or the largest measurement within each size range. So for a child particularly, you're going to find that there can be several inches between the smallest and the biggest measurement within that size range, and that makes a big difference at younger ages. And also different people like different kind of, the amounts of elastic, or tightness of elastic, that's the word. So I've got one child who loves it really snug, and I've got another one who likes it much looser. So I've got my elastic back through the hole. I'm going to unpin this here, and then I'm going to overlap the elastic by about an inch. You make sure to double check this. So I would normally now put an actual safety pin in this and let it slip back in the hole and try it on my child first. I've already measured this, so I know this is good, and I'm going to zigzag stitch this now before letting it slide back into my garment. So I'm going to just go back and forwards a few times with a zigzag stitch to hold this elastic in place. It doesn't need to be nice and tidy. This is going to get hidden inside the garment, but you just want to make sure that it's really secure. So once you've stitched this, if you give the elastic go back inside the waistband and then give it a bit of a stretch. So I take it by both ends and do this a few times, and it generally kind of pulls itself in. If you need to, you can pull it along with your fingers, but usually it'll just slip straight in. Now you've got two options with this. If, like me, you like to be economical and reuse garments year after year. My kids this year are already wearing last year's Christmas pajamas in the run up to Christmas, and then they'll get these new ones on Christmas Eve. Then what I would suggest you do is do not stitch this gap closed, because then next year you can come in here and you can snip the elastic, insert a new bit and reuse this in something else, and then you've got a bigger bit of pajamas, a bigger version of the pajamas for them for next year. If you want to have it nice and neat, then you're going to need to stitch it closed. So change to a straight stitch, and what you'll need to do is, because there's elastic in there, is you'll need to pull it quite taut on your sewing machine and line it up so that the needle is over the original stitching, and you're going to go back and forwards, straight down, and then close that up. I did not stitch that very straight with the camera between me and the sewing machine, so ignore this side. Let's put my finger over it. But on this side here, you can see I have just closed that gap up, and hopefully you will also not have a bobble of thread underneath like I have. But I can't see my machine very well around the camera, so there we go. So that is the elastic waistband now complete. To finish up the pajamas, we need to hem them. I have gone ahead and I've turned it up 1/2 inch and then 1 inch on the bottom to finish it. So it's just folded over and pressed twice, and I've done that on both legs. However, one of my tips, and then we're just going to sew it. That's how we're going to finish it. Or you can serge it and then stitch it closed. It's up to you. I would recommend, if you can, that you try it on the person first to get the right length for them. I like my pajamas longer. My husband likes them not touching the floor. It's completely up to you how you prefer it. So I always cut his a bit shorter. And then for kids who are growing, a tip is to cut the trousers out a couple of inches longer than you need, and then you can fold it up and make a nice deep hem, and then so longer than the pattern, and then you can unpick that and use them next year. So we're going to repeat this on the other trouser leg. So these are the trousers inside out. We've got the pockets, this is the front, the back will be higher. I'm also going to put a child's name sticker on the back because all my kids' pyjamas are identical and otherwise they'll argue whose is whose. And then we've just got the bottoms folded over. If you do it exactly by the pattern, you'll have beautifully finished French seams on all of these seams here where you can see my serging. Right, so because I'm a glutton for punishment, I have now sewed up these pyjamas for all 5 of us in my family. These are my husband's, mine, my son, my eldest daughter and my youngest daughter. And you can see I have actually stuck stickers in all of them. And then on mine and my husband's, I've drawn with a fabric marker with a little heart and our initials because otherwise, heavens knows when these come out of the wash, I'm not going to know whose they are. So I love these. I am so excited for Christmas Eve when I'm going to reveal them to the family and we're all going to get in them and hopefully eat popcorn and watch movies, and there might even be a bit of mulled wine. I can't wait.